President Trump and Joe Biden faced off in Cleveland Tuesday night. For nearly an hour and a half, the candidates did not hold back. The first question was about the president's Supreme Court nominee, but the conversation quickly turned to a number of other issues, including health care, abortion, and Bernie Sanders. That was in the first 10 minutes. If you tuned in, crosstalk might have been a main takeaway. Moderator and Fox News host Chris Wallace stopped multiple times during the debate to remind the candidates of the rules, saying at one point the American people would benefit from uninterrupted answers. The candidates were asked about a range of critical issues impacting the country. That included the coronavirus pandemic, the struggling economy, climate change, and racial injustice. On that note, President Trump was asked if he would condemn white supremacists. Instead, he directly addressed the far-right group, the Proud Boys, telling them to, quote, stand back and stand by. That and other moments are sure to make headlines. Here's some of what you may have missed.
We won the election, and therefore we have the right to choose her, and very few people knowingly would say otherwise.
The American people have a right to have a say in who the Supreme Court nominee is. They're not going to get that chance now because we're in the middle of an election already.
It's China's fault. It should have never happened. They stopped it from going in, but it was China's fault.
You should get out of your bunker and get out of the sand trap and get in your golf course and go in the Oval Office and bring together the Democrats and Republicans and fund what needs to be done now to save lives.
He will shut it down again. He will destroy this country. You take a look at what's happening at some of your Democrat-run states where they have these tough shutdowns. And I'm telling you, it's because they don't want to open it.
Mr. President, I'm asking you a question. Will you tell us how much you paid in federal income taxes in 2016 and 2017?
Millions of dollars.
You paid millions of dollars?
Millions of dollars,
So
yes.
not 750?
Millions of dollars, and you'll get to see it. And you'll get to see it.
He talks about these great trade deals. You know, he talks about the art of the deal. China's perfected the art of the steal.
China ate your lunch, Joe, and no wonder your son goes in and he takes out billions of dollars.
None of that is true.
Oh, really?
Totally,
Mr. President,
Mr.
President, please.
Totally discredited.
True.
You're going to have
true.
Gentlemen, I hate to raise my voice.
Remember what those people look like coming out of the fields carrying torches, their veins bulging, just spewing anti-Semitic bile. And they asked the president what he thought. He said there were very fine people on both sides. No president has ever said anything like that.
You can't even say the word law enforcement, because if you say those words, you're going to lose all of your radical left supporters.
Look, what I support is the police having the opportunity to deal with the problems they face. And I'm totally opposed to defunding the police officers.
Are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups?
Sure. I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right wing.
So what are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it.
Do you want to call them? What do you want to call them? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
who would you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by.
And will you pledge tonight that you will not declare victory until the election has been independently certified?
I'm urging my supporters to go into the polls and watch very carefully, because that's what has to happen.
Here's the deal. The fact is, I will accept it, and he will too. You know why? Because once the winner is declared, after all the ballots are counted, all the votes are counted, that'll be the end of it.
For more, I'm joined by Caitlin Huey-Burns, Nikole Killion, and Major Garrett. Caitlin is CBSN's political reporter and joins us from Cleveland. Nikole is a CBS News Washington correspondent, and Major is CBS News chief Washington correspondent. They both join us from Washington. All right. I feel like we can collectively exhale now. So let me start with you, Caitlin, because you are there in Cleveland. What were some of the biggest things that voters were looking for from both candidates tonight?
Well, heading into tonight, we know from our CBS News Battleground tracker that most people have made up their minds and were really tuning in, 73% tuning in to see their preferred candidate. Only 6% were tuning in to have their vote be persuaded, that were persuasive voters. I can say that after going through text chains with various groups of friends and family, I think the consensus was, if we can talk kind of in emojis, the face palm emoji or the kind of cringe face emoji, I think by and large, a lot of people tuning in tonight were just disgusted by the whole process, couldn't hear the candidates. I don't know which voters are served by what we saw tonight. And if we're looking for answers about who won this debate or who benefited, I think people that may have tuned it off or turned it off early may have been the winners of tonight.
You know, Major, I want to turn to you next because for people who aren't aware, you have studied Donald Trump, the candidate, from the very beginning.
Sure.
You are someone who has attended numerous rallies, countless rallies. You are also familiar, of course, with Joe Biden, covering him during his time in the Senate as well as in the Obama administration. So based on your observations and your experience covering both of these candidates, what is it that you actually saw from both men on that stage tonight?
So for the president, he did not do a lot of formal debate prep in the sense of preparing for issues and then having rejoinders. What he did prepare for was to try to force former Vice President Joe Biden to answer questions that former Vice President Biden would prefer not to answer. Wedge him in on issues like, do you support the police? Who is backing you among police? What would you do about the composition of the Supreme Court or the future of the filibuster? Though Chris Wallace asked that question, President Trump wanted to try to force Joe Biden to deal with that. And also, secondarily, constantly try to knock former Vice President Biden off his game by interjecting repeatedly. That's not necessarily a way to make points, but it's a way to try to knock your opponent off of his game. What I saw from Vice President Biden is something that is familiar in the inner circle of people who've worked for Joe Biden for 3 decades or more. And if you allow me, Elaine, let me tell you a quick story about his Senate race in 1990, because it matters in this context. It wasn't a close race, but it initially looked like it might be. Jane Brady was a Republican running against Joe Biden. She later became Attorney General in Delaware and sits on the bench there after that successful run as Attorney General. She was a newcomer, and the Biden campaign was somewhat afraid of debating her, thinking she might get some traction. Remember, 1990 is after Joe Biden ran for the Democratic nomination in 1988, had the whole Neil Kinnock plagiarism scandal. So there were things to pick at, and they were afraid of that. So the preparation for that debate was, don't deal with her. There was a Libertarian candidate, Leo Rosenbaum. So during that debate, what did Joe Biden do? He talked only to that Libertarian candidate and the moderator. He tried his level best to ignore the agitator, the Republican challenger. I thought I saw some of that tonight, where you saw Joe Biden talk to Chris Wallace and then talk to camera, try as best as he could not to let the president get in his head or knock him off his game. Sometimes he wasn't successful at that, but I know from the Biden debate prep, that's what they were trying to do, recreate that moment in 1990 where he didn't take the bait, he wasn't knocked off his game, and he tried to stay as close to his agenda items and his approach as he possibly could.
Nikole, let me turn to you. This debate, of course, took place against the backdrop or in the midst of this coronavirus pandemic, which has claimed the lives of more than 200,000 people in the United States. I want to play a little bit of sound from former Vice President Joe Biden in response to a question about the president's handling of the pandemic. Let's go ahead and take a listen. This is SOT 3, Control Room.
When he was presented with that number, he said, it is what it is. Well, it is what it is because you are who you are. That's why it is. The president has no plan. He hasn't laid out anything. He knew all the way back in February how serious this crisis was. He knew it was a deadly disease. What did he do? He's on tape as acknowledging he knew it. He said he didn't tell us or give people a warning of it because he didn't want to panic the American people. You don't panic. He panicked. I laid out back in March exactly what we should be doing. And I laid out again in July what we should be doing. We should be providing all the protective gear possible. We should be providing the money the House has passed in order to be able to go out and get people the help they need to keep their businesses open schools that cost a lot of money. You should get out of your bunker and get out of the sand trap and get in your golf course and go in the Oval Office and bring together the Democrats and Republicans and fund what needs to be done now to save lives.
Nikole, how did we see President Trump defend his response to the pandemic, and how does that fit in with what we've heard from the president over the course of the pandemic?
Well, for one, we saw him pull out his mask, which he's gotten questioned about a lot as far as holding these campaign events without bringing all these supporters together, without taking the necessary protocols. And he defended that by saying, everything's been fine and, nobody would come to see Joe Biden. They're just coming to hear me. But as far as the pandemic response, certainly we heard the president make a defense that he has made time and again, that, he did act, that he did, get masks and he got the gowns and they're working on therapeutics. And, he pretty much used the media as an out, blaming media coverage as far as the one area where he felt that things had gone awry. But, Joe Biden certainly for a while now has been arguing that the president has failed when it comes to the pandemic. And you saw him kind of make those arguments again in that soundbite. I thought probably one of the most effective parts was when he talked about, how many times have you seen an empty chair in your household because you've lost someone to COVID, really trying to put it in real terms that this disease is real and that he feels the president is not taking it seriously. So from that standpoint, to Major's point, as far as that debate prep, you kind of saw some of that coming into play as far as his response and kind of having those lines ready to go. But look, as far as the tone, all I can say is my notes just had guns blazing. The bottom line is that we're 5 weeks away. There's a lot on the line. And so I think that's why you saw, such an aggressive tone by both candidates tonight, simply because there's not much time left.
Major, I know you have to get going in a few minutes, so I want to ask you this next question here before you go. So this debate came days after this New York Times report that alleges the president paid no income tax for 11 out of the 18 years that they reviewed. How did we see, well, let's go ahead, control room, first of all, play SOT 8 if we have that ready here, because this was a point in the debate where the president was asked directly about how much he has paid in federal income taxes. Let's go ahead and listen to that.
No, Mr. President,
Go ahead.
I'm asking you a question. Will you tell us how much you paid in federal income taxes in 2016 and 2017?
Millions of dollars.
You paid millions of dollars?
Millions of dollars.
So
yes.
not 750?
Millions of dollars, and you'll get to see it. And you'll get to see it. But let me just tell you, Chris, let me just tell you something, that it was the tax laws. I don't want to pay tax. Before I came here, I was a private developer. I was a private business people. Like every other private person, unless they're stupid, they go through the laws, and that's what it is.
Major, what do you make of that answer and also this story? Because at this point, as we've said over and over, a lot of folks have their minds made up at this point. What did you make of his answer, and what have you made of his response to that story?
So the answer, I paid millions in taxes, has a ring of truth to it in the sense that the Trump organization paid millions of federal taxes for things related to its business efforts. You pay payroll taxes and other things. What the question was trying to drive at was what was the personal tax payment from President Trump. And when he said millions of dollars, he was referring to the Trump organization, not to himself personally. That's the way that his campaign, and that's the way those who speak on his behalf financially have tried to characterize this. The president has a golden opportunity to prove the New York Times to be completely wrong. He called it fake news on Twitter. Prove it. How do you do that? By releasing the tax documents and saying, see, you misread everything. All this is false, but he won't do that. He keeps promising he will, but the American people have already known and come to know that that promise continues and has continued since 2016, when he told Hillary Clinton, I'll release my taxes against the will and the advice of my lawyers. Never has done that. So that is his response on the specific question. The one aspect of the New York Times reporting, and CBS News hasn't seen the tax documents, we haven't verified it, we're just going off the assertions made by the New York Times, is that the story of Donald Trump is one extensive business exaggeration. That one of the reasons he did not pay a large amount in personal taxes because he was constantly asserting through tax documents that were verified, apparently, that he lost so much money he didn't have a tax liability, which means he's a churning loser in business, not a churning winner. For those who believe that mystique is important to their support for Donald Trump, that could be somewhat destabilizing. Do I think that's going to be a wave-type process for Trump supporters? I do not. I believe that they have bought into this, have continued to buy into it, and are not going to take their cues from the investigative team at the New York Times. And when they hear the president say, I paid millions of taxes, they'll say, he probably did. And if he didn't, just as he said in 2016, he was smart not to. What I thought was a kind of a missed opportunity for Vice President Biden is to say, look, the Trump campaign has said, I'm going to raise all these taxes. You know what? I am going to raise taxes on people who are wealthy, and I'm going to use that opportunity to rewrite the tax code to take away some of these provisions that are unnecessarily and unfairly generous to those at the upper income. He could have easily said that and made a nice pivot off of his tax plan, but he did not. I thought that was, for whatever reason, a missed opportunity for the Biden campaign.
All right, Major Garrett, I know you have to go. Thank you so much for being with us at this late hour. Caitlin Huey-Burns, I want to turn back to you there in Cleveland. Remind us of the backdrop, because we spoke to you many months ago about what Democratic primary voters had been looking for in a Democratic candidate in the lead up to this very moment. What is it that you heard over and over from them about the kinds of qualities that they were looking for as they were assessing the candidates? Because I know we've talked about this a lot in the past. This moment and these kinds of moments were precisely what people were factoring in to their assessment.
Absolutely. When primary voters were sizing up all the candidates way back in 2019 and throughout the course of the primary, they were imagining a night like tonight where the candidate that they would choose would have the chance to go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump. What we also heard over the course of the campaign, and I went to lots and lots of Biden events, followed him closely throughout the course of his primary campaign, he had these moments on the campaign trail. They were few and far between, but he did have these moments where he was asked a question and didn't like the question by a voter and actually took that voter on. There was a moment in Iowa where I was at a small town hall when a voter stood up and started to make these allegations against Hunter Biden, and the former vice president got really defensive and really stared him down. And when I talked to voters after that event and at subsequent events around the state on that trip, they said time and time again that that's the kind of Biden that they wanted to see, that they wanted to see this fighter, that they wanted to see someone who could really go on the offense against Donald Trump. Now, you can argue that the opportunities to do that were slimmer than you might have expected because of the ways in which President Trump continued and made it a strategy to continue to interrupt and kind of flood the zone with his own talk. But I think there were opportunities for the former vice president to really punch back. And I'm wondering if that will be, part of the strategy for a second debate, if there is a second debate after all of this. The candidates, of course, have agreed to 3 debates. That is something that we've heard from Democrats. They want to see Biden punch back, stronger. And so that's kind of, you saw moments of that from Biden tonight. You saw some evidence of intense preparation. He delivered lines that you could tell were intended to speak directly to the audience at home. It was really interesting watching the body language of the two candidates when Trump was mostly directing his comments to the former vice president. Biden was directing his comments directly to the camera and to viewers at home. The question is if they stuck around long enough to be able to listen to the whole thing. But what these campaigns want at the end of the day is clips of this that are disseminated across social media and internalized in kind of these bite-sized moments. And that is certainly a strategy by both campaigns.
So speaking of clips, control room, I want to get ready if we have it, SOT 16 here, and ask Nikole about it. This question that the president was asked, Nikole, at one point, if he would condemn white supremacists. And the answer certainly reverberated on social media as he said it. Let's go ahead and play now for the viewers who may have missed it, what the president's response was.
What are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it.
Do you want to call him? What do you want to call him? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
who would you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud Boys. Stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem.
So, Nikole, as someone who's covered and covers the president, what's your assessment of that response? Because we could hear the president there bring up the name of the Proud Boys, which is an extremist, considered an extremist organization.
Well, I thought it was interesting. Obviously, right before we had this show, obviously we had some debate analysis on our broader network, and I know we had an opportunity to ask Donald Trump Jr. about it. I believe Norah O'Donnell and John Dickerson did, and so what he seemed to suggest was that his father may have misspoke, or he wasn't exactly sure what his father meant. And so really, I think the only way to know what he meant is to ask him directly, which I'm sure he will be asked about, if not tonight, certainly tomorrow. But that being said, it does go back to the original premise of the question, or how that segment and conversation started, which went back to Charlottesville and that moment where the president said there were very fine people on both sides. And so, Joe Biden went back to what he said time and again, as far as that was a reason for why he got into this race, and really trying to make the argument that, no president would say there are fine people on both sides when you had white supremacists in Charlottesville several years ago, and the former vice president, bringing back some of those images that were very difficult to watch at that time. And so it goes back to his argument that he believes that the president is trying to send these dog whistles to various groups that are out there. Again, whether or not that was a direct appeal, again, I think it's just something that we would have to put to the president and to put to the White House and put to the campaign. But as I mentioned, as far as the president's son's response tonight, he seemed to suggest that perhaps the president misspoke.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns and Nikole Killion, a lot to sort through tonight. Thank you both so much for helping us get through at least some of it. Really appreciate it. Thanks.